Hi there. Welcome to this episode of the Meaningful Communication Show. I'm your host, Chad Eves, and today is going to be the first of 5 episodes exploring reasons behind communication failure. These reasons span all different types and forms of communication. They're applicable to pretty much anything that you might be doing, speaking, writing, video, visual design, whatever it might be. So let's move forward with this. The object is for you to have takeaways here to remove or minimize barriers that might be in your way. Communication, it can be hard enough as it is without making it unnecessarily harder with something that we can take off the table or minimize by developing new skills or managing the situation better. Number 5 is going to be when you have someone who is not professionally personable. For the lay person, this means the person's a jerk and you don't want to work with them. Now, why does this even exist? A lot of times there are people that maybe they have such a specialization, in talent and knowledge and skill that they're tolerated. Other times it can be that no one wants to do anything about it, that they do need them and they just are left to linger. They don't want to, poke that hornet's nest. But this can lead to a lot of different issues. With a team or organization, it can cause productivity issues. Maybe tasks and projects don't get done correctly or on time. We could have retention issues. And this all boils down to where that person is so unpleasant that to get the information or resources from that person, the price for not doing so, that pain has to be greater than dealing with the person. And when that happens, it's going to be for the shortest possible amount of time to get the bare minimum of what you need and then move on. When we work with people on this topic in organizations, we have a professionally personable spectrum that we use. And this is a simplified version of it here on the screen. If you're listening to this on the podcast, you can go to the YouTube channel or the website. Links will be below where you can see the spectrum chart that we're referring to here. But imagine a spectrum, and on one end you have a red zone. And in that red zone are people who are highly impersonable. On the other side, you have a blue zone where people are highly personable. In the blue zone, people are fighting to get that person on their team. Everybody enjoys working with that person. And across that spectrum, it changes. If you go from blue to red, you're going from someone that's highly personable to someone that's, people like to work with. They're not the ideal person, but like to. In the middle, you get into this gray area, the neutral necessaries. People that have stuff that you need and they're not really appealing or repulsive. And then you start crossing into the impersonable scale. And as you get closer and closer to the end, to that red end, people are less desirable to work with. If you are a leader of a team or a group or organization and you have someone that's in this red zone, it's time to really take a look at that, because this person or people, if you have more than one, can really start to impact how well your team and organization operates. It can start impacting stuff getting done on time, the quality of work, retention, with people even leaving that team or business because they're tired of dealing with that person. And it's not a situation where you just leave it. And some companies do that. I've seen this numerous times where no one wants to deal with the person because either they don't want to deal with the person because they're so unpleasant. They don't want to have to go through the maneuvers and the processes to discipline somebody. But there is another option, and that is helping them take corrective action. Because if someone has information that's needed that well and that has that high of a demand, there's potential there in some way. How do you help that person move out of the red zone and move back towards maybe more the middle and into the blue side on the other side of that spectrum. This is a real leadership opportunity for people in that position, because not that you necessarily would do that work one-on-one, but a better option might be to match that person up with a coach or a mentor, or perhaps even a therapist, depending on what that person needs and how that person responds to different types of input. But this is a role as a facilitator for most leaders. A lot of people are not equipped to handle this, and it's too often looked upon as some failure if a manager, leader, supervisor isn't able to deal with this kind of situation. Okay, remember, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and a lot of times it's not actually doing the task or the job, it's knowing where the specialist is and connecting people. And this is one of those examples. And there can be some real benefits to this. Number one, losing people is expensive. Yeah, whatever you have to go through the process of separating somebody and then hiring somebody or using a consultant, whatever it might be, that can get very expensive. And then also you have the cultural issues. That person does know the organization, even though they might not be working that well inside of it. You never know if the next person is going to be any better. They could be worse. And the last thing is, if you help someone grow, you help someone develop, you could have a person that is so loyal to you and the organization that everything could turn 180 degrees, from productivity, interactions, that person's engagement. That can be a huge win for you as a leader. So just because someone's in that red zone does not necessarily mean it's time to get rid of them. Now, if they're not responsive to coaching, mentoring, feedback, and they start being very disruptive, that could begin to enter the discussion of what does that person need to stay with the team or not. Now, some of you may be listening here and going, is that me? And like I said, a lot of people we don't usually have a really strong sense of self-awareness around a lot of our weaknesses, especially when it's something this personal. If you kind of sense you might be on the impersonable side of the spectrum, it's time to do some reflection. Because as an individual, this can hold you back. There's a saying of, you're hired for what you know, you're fired for who you are. And this can be one of those things that people, do get terminated for, is if they are not a fit for a team, if they cause problems. The thing is, it's correctable. It's a learnable skill that will help you in communications and beyond that. So sit down, do some reflection. Talk to some people that you trust. Talk to some people that you work with who may not be expecting it. Because most people will want to help. And if you approach people in the sense of, I have a question, I need your perspective on it. I've been thinking about this, and maybe you had an interaction with that person that did not go particularly well. You frame it like you want to learn, you want to help and get better. You can get a lot of goodwill if you do that sincerely. You go, depending on what your relationship is with your boss or supervisor, showing that kind of self-awareness can be huge, because we learn from our mistakes and what we do, in error. And the bigger error and problem and that we overcome, the bigger the win, the bigger the positive impression that we make. There could be situations in which you pursue assistance outside of work. And this is actually really common, where someone has a blind spot and they need help, whether it's with a more traditional communication skill or something like this, where someone is not able to relate and interact well, and they're beginning to get concerned about losing their job. Or maybe they've lost jobs and they've seen this pattern evolving, or maybe their significant other has brought this up. That is a really common reason to come to coaches such as myself, or therapists or mentors if you got someone in your world that you can talk to and trust. But that's a huge step. And if you kind of feel like that might be you, then you might be on that side of the spectrum. Chances are you probably are in some respect, or you might be harder on yourself than what reality is. But explore it, because you can gain so much benefit regardless of what the situation is. So, being highly impersonable, being over on this red side of the spectrum is a danger zone. So if you're a leader and you see someone doing this, if you yourself suspect you might be on this yellow, orange, red side of the spectrum, you need to work towards getting to the other side, because the problem that's going to come mainly from a communication perspective here is you're that unlikable. People hate you, dislike you, avoid you. The chances of them helping you do anything, of achieving any desired outcome, unless it is like really supported by like somebody high up the food chain, is pretty low. Even then, you always get like sent to the back of the line as far as time to help people, whatever else. So for you as an individual, find a way to move away from that. For you as a leader, look for ways to really uncover that potential that that person has, and hopefully that is successful in most situations, and more drastic action is not needed. So that's number 5. People who are not professionally personable, who are difficult to work with, they usually have problems getting any kind of successful communications done. And then next week we'll be back with number 4.